Righty, welcome. So today what we're going to do is just have a little go through the testing that we do with bowlers that come here. Because for me, one of the big things that I think bowlers aren't getting is an understanding of your body, an understanding of how your body works. You see your bowling all the time now, and you get people saying you need to do this, 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 and this. But what we want to do is put the mechanics and the understanding behind that to say, right, this is what's happening with your bowling. Now we can see why, because of the testing. Okay, so we're going to do 3 different rounds of testing. We're going to do movement assessments. We're going to do strength expression, which is different than just strength, because what I want to know is how you use the strength that you've got. And then we're going to look at power and velocity, looking at back foot contact time, ground contact time, arm speed and arm velocity. Okay?
Yeah, nice.
Sound good?
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Let's do it. Obviously testing done. So what we're going to do is go through and paint the picture. So first off, we'll look at the movement.
Yep.
Ankles. So like we said, there's 2 things we look for. Asymmetry, so big difference left to right, and a low score. For you, for your ankles, both pretty good, 45 and 44, low asymmetry and a decent score. So we could tick ankles off thinking movement-wise, fine. Yep. So a hip internal rotation, 31, 27. So your right foot, like we spoke about, what we want to see is landing where you land and be able to rotate through to take that hip. Mm-hmm. So when we see a low score at hip internal rotation on that bowling side, that worries us. Okay, so ankles okay, a bit of a flag on the hips, and then the other movement we want is around the thoracic. Now here was interesting for you because you were quite low left to right seated, so 58 and 54, it looked to struggle. It looked like you were forcing it. But then when we get into a half kneeling position, which opens up that chain, you had access to more range. So once we put your lower body with the upper body, it's more comfortable. You know, you've bowled for 20 odd years, so it tells us, you know, it's probably going to be there. But the fact that you're blocked when we isolate the thoracic more is a bit of an issue. You know, especially when we look at that hip shoulder separation and thoracic's blocked, hip internal rotation is blocked.
Okay.
So that would be the first thing. The base layer we think of is right. Those are the movement. We need to get that right.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we move into the sort of expression of strength. It's obviously, like I call it expression of strength because it's not strength.
Yeah.
It's what can your body do. So when we looked at the Ash test on the floor, this is isolating the shoulder. In the peak force for you, it says 2.45. It wasn't. It was 12.45 kilograms. Okay.
Okay.
So 12.45 right, 10.75 left. And then when we get you up into a front foot contact position, you're 14.7. So that shows us shoulders okay, but also you are using the body. So you're not just isolated. We see a lot of bowlers who are literally much more with the isolated shoulder than they are when the whole chain's working. So that tells us that, you know, you're a high-class bowler, you've been bowling for years, you'd expect to see that, okay?
How much of these figures, you talk about the hips and the thoracic, is that how much of that's wear and tear? And I've just got to monitor or...
Well, we wouldn't know.
Right.
Because, you know, if we had this every year since you were 20, we'd know.
Sure.
So if you were, say, 44 when you were 20 and now, we'd be like, right. But when we're talking about wear and tear, what we see is a system which we don't feed well enough so that we see these things come every year and just get a little bit more.
Yeah.
But it's reversible. Mm-hmm. That's the key with the body, is most things are reversible if we give it the right input.
Sure.
So then we looked at your mid-thigh pull, which was your sort of bigger strength marker. And what the normative data for this is, can you do between 120 to 160 times your body weight? You're at 150. So you're at the higher end of the normative data, but for bowlers, I'd want to see a little bit more. We've had some lads coming in and do 400 times their body weight.
Jesus.
And little lads, not lifters. And it's that huge expression of force, which is fantastic. So, but again, 150, we wouldn't look at that and be massively worried. So lateral flexion test, no one's doing this, so this is just for us to try and understand and get some data on this. But what we're seeing is exactly the same as what you had. When we're in that left-hand side lateral flexion, we're trying to pull against it, we're seeing less force available than the right-hand side. Now, when you talk about wear and tear, this could be one of those occasions where that left side, because of that whole asymmetry in the bowling, could just be knackered. But probably. It gives us an indication of, right, we'd rather get that a lot closer to the right-hand side and even be a little bit more dominant. Okay? So, but again, there's no normative data for this. Now, then we get into the standing single leg calf press. And now this, for me, is where we start seeing differences in bowlers at a high level with bowlers a little bit less. And for you scored pretty high on this. And again, what I like to see is, because there's more force that goes through front foot contact, the studies have shown it, but I like to see almost a little bit more available on that back foot, then we know we can get that hold position. We can get that co-contraction. Then you're 107.5 right, 103.5 left. So both good, the right just a bit more, and I'm absolutely fine with that. Because then when we jump over, so now we know what sort of force expression you've got. Then it's like, well, how can you use it with the jumping? Okay, so then we go into your counter movement jump. Now for you, max height of 42.5. We know that the levels of the counties, they want to get you 40 and above. So that's fine. We know you can jump. But then it's the drop jumps, which are, for me, the real difference maker. Can you, like I said, use the force that you've got? So your best one, double leg drop jump, RSI of 1.23. So contact time 0.276, which is fantastic. Jump height 33.9, which is okay. So what we want to see here, RSI between 1.2 to 1.6. So you're at the lower end of that, but again, the people we're testing, non-pros are scoring a lot less. A lot less. So I expected to see a decent score, and that's an okay score. Okay, especially at 39.
That give me some credit.
But then this is the real difference maker, the single leg drop, because what we're seeing is a lot different from guys who can bowl quick. And even though you probably wouldn't say you're a quick bowler, you have to be at a certain pace to be able to bowl as long as you have.
Yeah.
You know, so you were 0.63 on your right leg for RSI, single leg drop, which is great, which is fantastic. You know, 0.8 would be where we're really, really happy, but, you know, 0.63, jump height of 18.8, contact time of 0.3 on the nose, happy. Okay. Left side, a little bit less, 0.48, but what this shows us again is, you know, you can transmit force and you can use it. Okay, so that's all working pretty well. And then what we looked at is your upper body, mediball slams. So what we're looking at here is peak velocity of your arm with the 5 kg throw in overhead, and your peak one was 8.72. So what we want to see here is around 9 for real high level, so you're really close to that.
Okay.
Which is great, because again, you know, for you, I know sort of what your training hasn't been around this. But again, we see the commonalities of people who can bowl quick can do this. And then to finish off, half kneeling bowling. Okay, so what we've got here is, you know, we've looked at your meters per second of your arm, also the speeds which came out. Okay, so when we looked at the speeds, they were all quite similar. All quite similar. And in fact, your arm speed velocity was all quite similar as well. But the really interesting thing was the 300 gram ball, you got the quickest arm speed velocity out, 14 meters per second, which is a good arm speed. You know, if you're getting a 15, then you're looking at quick. So that was really interesting. That I think that was correlated with your quickest ball as well, 45 miles an hour at 14 meters per second, which tells us, it would probably surprise you, that you're a little bit more comfortable in the strength realm than the arm speed one. Okay. So then when we looked at your bowling, and when we look at everything which is going on here, again, you know, a high quality bowler, we're not saying to change anything, but it just gives you an indication of what's going on. So why is that ankle collapsing? Perhaps we're not co-contracting the way we need to. Okay, but it's then from there getting that hip through. So for you, we can see that hip and the shoulder are pretty much in line. The hip's going through fractionally before, so you are creating some hip shoulder separation, but your shoulder is doing a lot of work. That's the thing to say from there. Okay, and that tells us again, it's borne out in the data that you're quite comfortable in that position working hard. For you now, if we could get the hips working right, if we could open up the thoracic a little bit more, then we could be getting into an easier transition from back to front foot. And, you know, in that position there where you get into the front foot contact, if we've got this hip just a little bit more forward, then we're using that. We're using the hip shoulder. But at the moment, I don't envisage you could do that well with those scores. Okay, and they're the only two really that would concern me, to say, not to a massive level. I think you're going to break, but right, if you get those right, then suddenly you can feel that efficiency. And where I look at things, I think efficiency is the key metric for bowlers, which is why Jimmy can still bowl at 42. Pretty similar to when he was 25, because his action's so efficient and his back foot's so efficient. So for you, that's where I would be looking at. From the back foot, just collapse. If we can hold that more there and just rotate that foot around that way, once you land, then we could help that hip a little more. So that's what the data is telling us. What are you thinking about that?
So what as a 39-year-old, I'd love to have seen this 10 years ago or so. I think potentially my training has made me 100% made me more like that.
You now, so this is, you know, you bowling at 38, 39. If we had video of you bowling when you were 19, I think we'd see a hell of a lot of differences. Because what happens is whatever training we're doing, the fascial system will mold round it. So what you can see then is that adaptation, but not often a positive adaptation, because if the trainer's not right for you and how you bowl, it's going to force you into positions you don't necessarily want to be in.
Sure.
And then you're just getting stuff said to you, like a coach saying, oh yeah, but you're not strong enough, you're not this, you're not that. And you're like, no, you're doing the strength work, you're fine strength-wise. You know, the numbers tell us you're fine strength-wise. It's actually the almost neuromuscular sequencing.
Yeah.
But then we're seeing that hip blocked as well. So, yeah mate, you're totally right. It will be really interesting to look, to see the differences, and then, you know, differences in pace and things like that. I think maybe when you were 19, you probably might have jumped higher. You might not have, you know, we're never going to know, but almost the body's natural ability gets beaten out of it with poor training.
Yeah, so interesting actually. I've always thought like this because I had a couple of stress fractures. I think quite late actually, relatively, compared to a lot of bowlers. So I reckon 24, 25.
Yeah.
The one thing, if I could, that I would have changed was my back foot pointing more down the pitch. Not loads especially, but I land parallel with the crease. I'd love to just turn it, or be able to turn it a bit more.
I completely understand what you're saying, because what you think is if your back foot's pointing that way, you haven't got to do the pre-turn, which is true. But what we see is if your foot's pointing that way, but it's still planting instead of being on the ball of the foot.
Yeah.
Because if we're on the ball of the foot, we can express the back leg to keep coming forward, to keep that hip coming forward. What we're seeing is people landing like a brake's gone on.
Yeah.
So then that hip is staying there, that back hip staying there, so the pelvis, instead of going forward almost together at front foot contact, and then you create that natural hip shoulder separation, is that right side is just almost dead in the dirt, and then the left side keeps going, so the pelvis opens up anyway.
Yes.
So for me, it wouldn't be looking at your bowling and looking at anyone's bowling, I wouldn't be thinking, I want to change the angle, I want to change what you do with it, because that's how you land. If we can actually adapt it so that then you land there with the heel up and we can transition it, then the natural sort of ability that you've got would shine through. At the moment, you know, when I look at your bowling still, I think you're forcing the ball down there. So yeah, I wouldn't change the angle, I'd change what happens at the back foot.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay.
It's interesting actually when you say forcing it, because I've grown to be quite comfortable forcing it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In fact, I quite like that, right? When it gets tight, it gets flat, and there's been a partnership and stuff, I've always been like, yeah, this is me here. I can kind of grunt longer than most people can. Do you know what I mean? I can keep going. But yeah, that's interesting.
But that's the issue, is you having to do that because of the way the body's moving. Just imagine you suddenly flip that now and you've got that efficiency, suddenly you'd be 39 going on 40, but with a body which now doesn't feel it. And thinking, actually, no, I can keep going and keep going and keep going.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
Because the body's working the right way. And then you think of a 22-year-old who's just been load for 3-4 years by a barbell, they're going to be in a worse position, physically and sort of technically.
So in terms of this back foot then, what do I have to do to...
So for me now, it would be, like I said, we've got no issue with the range. We've got not a lot of issue with your standing calf and the force you can actually use. The jump numbers were a little bit low in terms of how high you could jump.
Is this single leg you're referring to?
Yeah. So for me, with you now, I would do a lot of isometric work, a lot of co-contraction work, where you're learning the muscles and the tendons to be able to turn off and on, off and on. It wouldn't be a lot of natural strength work, what you would assume would be strength work.
Yeah.
It would be the difference between that fascial, off and on, co-contraction work and isometrics. They would be the king, and medieval work. Yeah. But the caveat for that would be making sure we're getting the hips and the pelvis working right. Yeah. That would be the big thing. You know, we get that. So now, if you're one of my players from now to Christmas, it would be hips and thoracic and integrating that whole movement. Yeah. And then after Christmas, it would be co-contraction, lower limb, making sure we're in those positions, and then taking the movement we have and upping the force with it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like it. Sweet.